So I want to start by, I want to read something from your website, which I thought was just so fabulous. Founded in 1997, Monicaville Barnes and Company is a contemporary American dance company that brings dance where it does not belong. We create and produce each work entirely from its own rule book, dancing to radio interviews on the biggest stages in the world, hosting a weekly show in a crowded office party, or leading a choreographed exercise routine in an art museum. Within each of these new contexts and borrowed environments, we constantly find humor in our awkward everyday triumphs and failures. So that to me is just it's a wonderful reason for being at this time in our world. And I think when I saw this work in New York, I saw it with my daughter, who was 22 at the time, and the fact that both of us could just be so into it together was just really, truly joyous. So I just want to say, could you just talk a little bit about where the idea of this work came from?
Thank you for reading that. Actually, that's Robbie wrote that, and I think it does so wonderfully. I think any arts organization or dance company or theater, it's such a struggle to try and understand what you're really doing, what you want to do, what you're actually doing, what you thought you were doing. And I do just feel like that so perfectly talks about the way we work and what we hope to be making. So thank you for reading it. It sounds nice out loud. I've never heard it. Well, in a lot of ways, this work started as a reaction to the show that we made with Ira. And it was such an incredible process to work with him and to bring stories, radio stories, and dance, which we all admitted sounded like a terrible idea, and then sort of worked out to feel like just such a valuable and exciting show. And the way that we presented that show was just in huge theaters, which was thrilling. Like, that there's something so fun about that. But that 2,000 seat theaters, and there's such a limit to the way you can perform in those spaces, and it really dictates a lot about your relationship to the audience. And I felt like the show was really personal, and it felt self-revealing, and it felt funny, and all the things that I think we hope for in any show. But it felt like we were operating within a narrow scope as performers, because you sort of, just literally have to sort of keep your chin up the whole time because there's a balcony. So I think some of the impetus for the show was wanting to do something that felt entirely different. And I think also just physically, like every show that we make, I think is in response to the show before that one.
We were, the show began with 1 million costume changes, which also existed in the show with Ira. We changed characters a lot in that show, and we have a great time doing that. So this one began, a lot of the source material was based around this section we're going to be wearing headdresses, and this section we're going to be in sequins show gowns, and then in this section we're going to be in suits. And then we realized there's no way we could change costumes because we never left stage. And the suits felt so amazing. Once we put them on, we never wanted to take them off, and the characters came immediately from them. They're called Gray Suit and Blue Suit. Those are their names. And if you were wondering. So a lot of the show came from the suits.
And then I feel like when we started performing it, I feel like it really, we knew we wanted karaoke, and we were in the show, and we were in Florida. And then Robbie,
I think you asked for, you actually don't remember the 3 words, but you said we're gonna do this show. So we were trying to figure out what kind of space the show should be in. Honestly, we felt very confused about it. But you asked for 3 things. Do you remember what those 3 things were? I don't. But it was be funny to everybody as they come in. Or it wasn't even as they come in. It was just we need something that is funny but kind of not...
Makes people nervous.
But it makes people nervous.
And seems sort of unprepared or
something.
something.
I don't remember what it was. And then I just sort of went out on stage for 20 minutes and did something similar to what happened here at the beginning of the show without all of the candy. So they really got like a bad version. But then we just started doing it in all different sorts of spaces. And we were doing a talkback like this in an actual office at a conference room. We had a residency at NYU, and it was this teeny tiny conference room. And after the talkback, we were talking and just said that we should just do the show in here once for just like photos. Like we had done it in like a big 350-seat theater. We had done it in a black box theater. We had done it in all these different kinds of rooms. And like, let's just take photos of it in this room. And we invited 30 people and did the show in there. And it felt like everyone was really responsible for what happened in the show then in a different way. There's no escaping. You're sort of everyone's seeing each other. And there's all these sort of, weird and hopefully funny things that happen in this show, but people are really put on the spot in a way. And in a room of just 30 people, that really felt interesting, because why doesn't the audience just sort of stop and say, like, that's too much? You're in the same light. You could just sort of get up and say, that person looks embarrassed, and you're not, like, letting off of them. So it feels like a really interesting way to, like, make everyone in the room responsible for what's happening.
What floors me is just how male you two are. And can you talk a little bit about your research? How did you begin to embody these characters that are so fully formed that when you break into song, it's absolutely shocking to the whole audience? When you're over here and we hear your voices full on for the first time.
I mean, it's so funny. I think you realize when we started and we put the suits on, well, we sort of immediately, two things felt really apparent. One was that, this sounds silly to say, but I've always dressed and been a woman on stage, and I've always wanted and been interested in humor. And I've realized over sort of years of, trying to be funny on stage and dress like a woman, that there's a certain toughness that you have to sort of let the audience know you're okay so they can laugh at you. There's a kind of, you have to sort of build yourself up in a way so that it feels okay. And what felt amazing the instant the suits were on was that I felt like I can deal in a level of failure and vulnerability as a man, and it can be funny. That it feels like it feels okay to laugh at men, because we, I think, assume they're okay, or confident enough, or can take it in a way that I feel so different when I'm dressed in our like sequence dresses, or like when I'm dressed as a woman, I feel like I'm really responsible for all of womankind, and I don't want anybody to laugh at me in a way that I don't feel comfortable with people laughing at women. It takes on like such a responsibility. And as a man, I felt like, oh my gosh, there's so much more humor to be mined, because I can sort of I can fail so much. I can sort of I can be so sort of low, and the audience somehow stays with me in a way that I couldn't understand. It's not to say it's not possible. I just don't know how to do it as a woman without feeling like I would worry that the audience would worry or feel sorry for me.
We were performing with Ira at the same time that we were making it, so we were on stage with him so much, and he always has his hands in his pockets. He always wears a suit. That is his uniform, is a suit, and so we observed him a lot. And just started watching men on the subway. It's so fascinating. You guys are amazing. It's so fun to be you. And I feel like my character in particular I feel this permission to just behave inappropriately that I would never do while dressed as a woman. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And they've developed over time, these men.
We've just started interviewing all the women who get taken up on stage and recording them, because we do the show in New York. We build this tiny like room like this in a studio, and we started interviewing them. And I think we thought that because we started last October, as a lot of things were changing in the world, we started to feel like we needed to not just do the show, but kind of talk about it. And we were in Santa Barbara at a school, and Monica was teaching. And when she teaches, it's often like just a group of like 200 18 to 21-year-old young women. And it was like the audience was 18 to 21-year-old young women and your Uncle Pete, who I believe was maybe in the military or looked like he was. He was not happy looking in a great way. But it just felt like we needed to understand what it's like from the audience's perspective in this moment that everyone's sort of trying to define, like, what is crossing a line. And I think the thing that surprised us so much in this sort of offshoot project is all of the women so far who are in the chair just sort of love it. And it's such a funny surprise, actually. I mean, I don't know if that's completely true, and we could talk afterwards. But it's such a I think what's been really interesting about that and so unexpected is that it seems like they're sort of joining you in the commentary that you're doing, as opposed to actually being on the spot. And the sort of just the ability, I think, for women to really kind of gather around something similar in this moment feels really wonderful and totally caught me off guard, actually, that's the way it was mostly responded to.
How and why did you choose the songs that you chose? And you're able to hold on to this deadpan face. Have you ever cracked?
I don't think we've ever cracked. We always, I know, our practice is that before you guys come, we always do the show in its entirety. So we run the show twice, and we crack during our rehearsal. We get it out of the way. A ton.
Like, just to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we've been doing this for 4 years, and you still like crack each other up in the rehearsal, like you just did this afternoon. I don't like you shoved her into the table, and it was just like harder than usual, and yeah, but always.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's such a what we really love about the performing. I think to speak for both of us is the nuance and the sort of caricature and the strangeness of it. We love the dancing, but so every rehearsal we're fully like we're miming that we're like picking up a woman's hand, and like we're it's the bizarrest sort of like mime routine that we'll go through. And so I think we're trying to like practice the facial muscles of it all, and I think that we do just have a really because we're so serious during rehearsal, and then when you crack in rehearsal, you sort of know where you're vulnerable. There's a couple times where we look at the bridge of each other's nose because we can't look into our eyes. Well, the music so perfectly starts in a really known world with all the karaoke, and then Hurts So Good really feels like such a bridge song. And then it's purposefully nostalgic. It's intentionally familiar songs, but it ranges, as you know, because you just heard it all, from Elvis, live recordings of Elvis Presley and Judy Garland. And I think the idea that the music is sort of indicating, hopefully, a certain timelessness and a bit of a theatricality in it, and then to end up back in the karaoke 1980s world sort of hopefully feels like you've returned. I think a lot of it is nostalgia and some sort of creating of empathy of this situation.